Hi everyone, wishing you all the best of your health. I am Kapila here and today we'll take up the chapter Nelson Mandela, A Long Walk to Freedom. Nelson Mandela was born in South Africa. He was a great leader of South Africa and he fought against the apartheid regime which is based upon racial discrimination. He spent more than 30 years of his life in the prisons of South Africa. And when the first democratic elections were held in 1994, his party, African National Congress, won the seats and made the first democratic government there. This extract here has been taken from his autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom, and here it is telling us about the inauguration speech that was there, the inauguration ceremony that was held in the United Amphitheatre of the United Buildings in Pretoria. So let us read it. Before we begin with the chapter, we have an excerpt from a newspaper. Let us read it. Nelson Mandela has become South Africa's first black president after more than 3 centuries of white rule. Mr. Mandela's African National Congress party won 252 out of 400 seats in the first democratic elections of South Africa's history. The inauguration ceremony took place in the Union Buildings Amphitheatre in Pretoria today, attended by politicians and dignitaries from more than 140 countries around the world. Never again will this beautiful land experience the oppression of one by another, said Nelson Mandela in his address. Jubilant scenes on the streets of Pretoria followed the ceremony with blacks, whites and coloreds celebrating together. More than 100,000 South African men, women and children of all races sang and danced with joy. So this was the scene after the first elections were held and after the inauguration ceremony was held in the amphitheatre there in the United Buildings. So there were dignitaries from all over the world and there were people of all races dancing and enjoying together. So it was a victory of truth. It was a victory of the suppressed and the oppressed of the South African people. An exercise is given before we begin with the chapter. You can very easily match the columns. Now let us begin with the chapter. 10th May dawned bright and clear. For the past few days, I had been pleasantly besieged by dignitaries and world leaders who were coming to pay their respects before the inauguration. The inauguration would be the largest gathering ever of international leaders on South African soil. So, because it is an extract from the autobiography, I is Mr. Nelson Mandela and he's telling us how so many dignitaries from all over the world, they were in contact with him, they were all surrounding him and they had come there to congratulate him on the eve of independence and gaining freedom of South Africa. The ceremonies took place in the lovely sandstone amphitheatre formed by the Union Buildings in Pretoria. So this is the place where the ceremony took place. For decades, this had been the seat of white supremacy, and now it was the site of a rainbow gathering of different colors and nations for the installation of South Africa's first democratic non-racial government. So beautifully he has written that that particular building, which was the center of the whites, that had now become the center of all the races. They had come over there. So that is why it is a rainbow gathering. All sorts of people belonging to all races, they had come over there. On that lovely autumn day, I was accompanied by my daughter Zenani. On the podium, Mr. de Klerk was first sworn in as second deputy president. Then Thabo Mbeki was sworn in as first deputy president. When it was my turn, I pledged to obey and uphold the Constitution and to devote myself to the well-being of the Republic and its people. To the assembled guests and the watching world, I said, today, all of us do, by our presence here, confer glory and hope to newborn liberty. Out of the experience of an extraordinary human disaster that lasted too long, must be born a society of which all humanity will be proud. So that human disaster is the apartheid regime. So it had lasted long. For long, those people of South Africa, they had suffered. We, who were outlaws not so long ago, have today been given the rare privilege to be host to the nations of the world on our own soil. We thank all of our distinguished international guests for having come to take possession with the people of our country of what is, after all, a common victory for justice, for peace, for human dignity. So this is how he's defining his freedom. It is freedom for justice, for peace, and for human dignity. We have at last achieved our political emancipation. We pledge ourselves to liberate all our people from the continuing bondage of poverty, deprivation, suffering, gender, and other discrimination. So there were lots and lots of discrimination happening there in South Africa, and he pledged that he would be freeing his country from all those discriminations. It was not only the political freedom, rather these kinds of freedom also will be given to the people. Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another. The sun shall never set on so glorious a human achievement. Let freedom reign. God bless Africa. To have the feel of the speech, let's listen to Nelson Mandela's speech.
Today all us do, by our presence here, confer glory and hope to newborn liberty. Out of the experience of an extraordinary human disaster that lasted too long, must be born a society of which all humanity will be proud. That we, who were outlaws not so long ago, have today been given the rare privilege to be hosted to the nations of the world on our own soil. We thank all our distinguished international guests for having come to take possession with the people of our country. What is, after all, a common victory for justice, for peace, for human dignity. We have at last achieved our political emancipation. We pledge ourselves to liberate all our people from the continuing bondage of poverty, deprivation, suffering, gender, and other discrimination. Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another. The sun shall never set on so glorious a human achievement. Let freedom reign. God bless Africa. I thank you.
Now, let us do oral comprehension check. Question 1. Where did the ceremonies take place? Can you name any public buildings in India that are made of sandstone? The ceremonies took place in the amphitheatre of the Union Buildings in Pretoria. And some of the buildings in India that are made of sandstone are the Rashtrapati Bhavan, the Red Fort, and the Parliament. Can you say how 10th May is an autumn day in South Africa? Symbolically, It is an autumn day because in autumn also the old leaves, they are shed by the trees. Similarly, the age-old regime of apartheid that had been followed there in South Africa by the whites, that was given away, that was shed off, and the people had new government which was based on democracy and equality, justice for all. At the beginning of his speech, Mandela mentions an extraordinary human disaster. What does he mean by this? What is the glorious human achievement? The extraordinary human disaster was the apartheid regime under which discrimination was done to the people of South Africa. They were depressed, oppressed, and suppressed. And the achievement was the freedom from this apartheid regime and a promise, a pledge to give them social justice, economic justice, and take away all the deprivations from which they were suffering. Next question. What does Mandela thank the international leaders for? Mandela thanks the international leaders for being present there at the inauguration and to stand with them and give them recognition to fight against the apartheid regime and also welcoming this new sun and the new dawn for justice and against poverty and deprivations. So giving them recognition, he thanked all those people that they had come there to witness that freedom because it was a freedom of human dignity. So that is why he thanked them. Next question. What ideals does he set out for the future of South Africa? So for the future of South Africa, he set the ideal of no apartheid regime there, then upliftment of the people over there, their deprivations, the poverty, discrimination of any kind on gender or economy or anything else, that would be taken away, and it would be a government free of such discriminations, and that would be giving them happiness and prosperity. Now, let's read the next part of the chapter. A few moments later, we all lifted our eyes in awe as a spectacular array of South African jets, helicopters, and troop carriers roared in perfect formation over the Union buildings. It was not only a display of pinpoint precision and military force, but a demonstration of the military's loyalty to democracy, to a new government that had been freely and fairly elected. So it was very important. Earlier, these helicopters, this military, they were loyal only towards the whites. But now they were displaying this pattern there in the sky for the newly formed democratic government. So they were showing their loyalty towards this elected government. That is why it was important. Only moments before, the highest generals of the South African Defence Force and Police, their chests bedecked with ribbons and medals from days gone by, saluted me and pledged their loyalty. So just some time before this display of the patterns of helicopters and all, the higher officials who were bedecked, they were all having those badges here, and they had saluted him and they had pledged their loyalty to him. So to the newly elected government, they had sworn their loyalty. They had taken a pledge. I was not unmindful of the fact that not so many years before, they would not have saluted but arrested me. So while they had done that, they had saluted him, he was in the thought that some time back, those were the people who would have not saluted him. Rather, they would have arrested him. Finally, a chevron of Impala jets left a smoke trail of the black, red, green, blue and gold of the new South African flag. So these are the colors which are there in the South African flag, and those colors, the jets, they left a trail of those colors. Right? They were in the sky, those beautiful colors of the South African flag. The day was symbolized for me by the playing of our two national anthems and the vision of whites singing Kosi Sikil, I Africa, and blacks singing Die Stem. The old anthem of the Republic, although that day neither group knew the lyrics of the anthem they once despised, they would soon know the words by heart. So hope is there in this paragraph. He's showing hope. He gave importance to both the anthems. Both the anthems were sung there, and even though they did not know and they had hated the previous anthem, but still they would be learning very soon. They would also learn the lyrics of the new anthem also. On the day of the inauguration, I was overwhelmed with a sense of history. In the first decade of the 20th century, a few years after the bitter Anglo-Boer War and before my own birth, the white-skinned peoples of South Africa patched up the differences and erected a system of racial domination against the dark-skinned peoples of their own land. So this is how the racial discrimination began. It was after the Anglo-Boer War. The people who were there of the white, the color, they had done the apartheid regime after the Anglo-Boer War, and they stood up a system. They erected a system. They made a system, right? And they started following that apartheid regime against the blacks. So the whites were also of their country only, their own land, and they only did that discrimination with the blacks of their country. The structure they created formed the basis of one of the harshest, most inhumane societies the world has ever known. Now, in the last decade of the 20th century and my own 8th decade as a man, that system had been overturned forever and replaced by one that recognized the rights and freedoms of all peoples regardless of the color of their skin. So as he was sitting there in that inauguration speech, he went into the history and he started thinking how the apartheid came into vogue in practice, and then how it was in all these years it was replaced again, and now the people, they would be treated fairly without the color of their skin. That day had come about through the unimaginable sacrifices of thousands of my people whose suffering and courage can never be counted or repaid. I felt that day, as I have on so many other days, that I was simply the sum of all those African patriots who had gone before me. So he's not saying that I am the only one who has got this freedom. Rather, he's giving recognition. He's remembering all those heroes who had begun this freedom fight and had laid down their lives before him. So he's remembering all of them. The history he's remembering. That long and noble line ended and now began again with me. I was pained that I was not able to thank them and that they were not able to see what their sacrifices had wrought. So now he was really unhappy that all those people who had made so many sacrifices, they were not present there, they were all dead, and they were not able to see the fruit that was there, the fruit of freedom that had come to South Africa because of the sacrifices of all those people. The policy of apartheid created a deep and lasting wound in my country and my people. Yes, the word itself, apartheid, tells us that how harsh the people must have been upon the blacks, how they were tortured mentally, physically, and in all the manners. So it was a wound that could not fill very easily. All of us will spend many years, if not generations, recovering from that profound hurt. But the decades of oppression and brutality had another unintended effect, and that was that it produced the Oliver Tambos, the Walter Sisselus, the Chief Luthius, the Yusuf Dadus, the Bram Fishers, the Robert Sabkis of our time. So these were all extraordinary men of the time, and they were all produced just because of the tortures and torments that were done by the whites on these people. Because all these people, they had tortured the black ones, so these leaders, they had come up. These were the extraordinary men who fought against it. Men of such extraordinary courage, wisdom, and generosity. that their like may never be known again. So he believes that men like these extraordinary men, because they had a lot of courage to fight against the whites, they had a lot of wisdom, they had a lot of generosity, they were so kind to their own people, that such qualities can never ever be seen again in any of the people. Perhaps it requires such depths of oppression to create such heights of character. So Nelson Mandela personally believes that if you want such beautiful characters, such heights, such big character, if you want like these extraordinary men, then you have to suffer lots and lots of oppression like these people had suffered. Because they had suffered such great disastrous things on them, that is the reason why their character had built up so much. My country is rich in the minerals and gems that lie beneath its soil, but I have always known that its greatest wealth is its people, finer and truer than the purest diamonds. So this is what he believes, that these gems which are there in the country, they are not finer, but the people who are there, they are more pure than the diamonds. It is from these comrades in the struggle that I learned the meaning of courage. Time and again, I have seen men and women risk and give their lives for an idea. I have seen men stand up to attacks and torture without breaking, showing a strength and resilience that defies the imagination. I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. So he is telling his own experience, what he has seen in all these extraordinary men. What he has seen is that they have fought against all the odds, all the fears that they had, and beyond imagination they have done that. And he has realized that courage doesn't mean absence of fear, rather it is winning over the fear that you have. So this is what he has learned from all these extraordinary men who have shown great strength in their character and life and have won over many battles of life. No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love, for love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. So he believes that nobody is born with hatred inside him or herself for the people who are of some other color or religion. And he believes that hatred also needs to be taught. So if hatred can be taught, love can also be taught. This is his belief. And love comes more naturally than hatred. Even in the grimmest times in prison, when my comrades and I were pushed to our limits, I would see a glimmer of humanity in one of the guards. Perhaps just for a second, but it was enough to reassure me and keep me going. Man's goodness is a flame that can be hidden but never extinguished. See what a belief this man had when he was there inside the prison also. He was being tortured beyond limits, right? They had crossed all the limits. They were torturing him and the other comrades, the people who were there with him. But he would see even little humanity, only for seconds, that was seen there in the guard's face or in his expression, that would give him hope. And he knew that this flame that is there inside a human, that can never ever be extinguished. It will be there. Only the wind has to blow and it will again flame up. Now, let us do the oral comprehension check. What do the military generals do? How has their attitude changed and why? See, earlier, before the democratic elections were held, these very military generals would have arrested Nelson Mandela. But after the democratic elections were held and his party had won and there was democratic government, all these people who were bedecked with ribbons, bedecked is decorated with ribbons and badges on their uniform, they all showed their loyalty and saluted to him, showing that they had given respect and recognition to the elected government. Next question. Why were two national anthems sung? The two national anthems were sung to show respect to both the communities which were there in South Africa, that is the whites and the blacks. So for the whites, their national anthem was sung, and for the blacks, their national anthem was sung, giving respect to both the communities of South Africa. Next, how does Mandela describe the systems of government in his country in the first decade and in the final decade of the 20th century? So earlier in the first decade, it so happened that the Anglo-Boer War was there, and after that the whites of their own land, they had practiced the regime of apartheid on those people. There were torments and tortures, and people were oppressed and suppressed everywhere, and no rights were given to them. But slowly and gradually in the final part of the century, it so happened that the apartheid regime, it ended, and the elected government, which was a democratic government, that took over the country, and people had hope for justice, for equality, for happiness, and taking away the poverty and the deprivations. Next question. What does courage mean to Mandela? For Mandela, courage is a very, very deep term. Looking at in the history at all the extraordinary men, what he has learned is that it is not only physical strength, rather it is mental strength also. It means that a person needs to overcome his fears. Only then he can be courageous. If one doesn't have a fear and doesn't overcome the fears, one cannot be courageous. This is what he understood, because those extraordinary minds, those extraordinary characters were made through the oppression, the disastrous oppressions that were done to them. Next question. Which does he think is natural, to love or to hate? For Nelson Mandela, to hate is also to be learned, and to love also you have to learn. So if you can be taught to hate, you can be taught to love also, and love comes more naturally than hate. So people should be taught to love humans irrespective of their caste, color, creed, religion, etc. And that would be giving importance and giving victory to human dignity. The chapter is too long, so we will conclude this video here, and the rest of the chapter will be there in the part 2. Till then, stay home, stay safe.